Gidi. Great answer. I liked it.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Okay, moving on. So for our next presenter, our next lecturer, Ben Herzberg. So Ben is raising. Hi Ben. Ben is going to speak about or tell us how to reduce operational costs by automating data security. Data security is one of the hottest things nowadays, as you are probably familiar with. Ben is raising 3 future actors at home, like good food, hiking, and people. Not people, the company, people in general. Also people, the company. You know, some of us indeed. In his background, so offensive security, you even heard Alex, they worked together in the past. Former CTO and VP R&D of Cynet, former head of research at Imperva, and currently the chief scientist and VP marketing of Satori. And he is also the co-author of Snowflake Security by Press. Really recommended. And you will see it also in the last slide if you are curious to see here and find more details about the book. So Ben, without further ado, the stage is yours.
So thanks Gidi, and hi everybody. Do I have control? Yeah? No?
Should have. Give it a click.
No. Wait. You're controlling. I am controlling, but okay. I'm going to have to get used to it. Okay, so you said all there is to know about me. I'm chief scientist of Satori for the last 3 years, part of the founding team. And for the last month or so, I'm also a VP marketing, learning how to do that as well. And before that, I was doing mainly security and coding, I would say, and research. That's most of what I was doing. Here's my contact details in case anyone wants to connect. Maybe someone is shy to ask questions in front of everyone. They can connect as well. And the photos I used are from Pixabay, so at least most of them. So just the credit. Okay, so what we're going to talk about, and I want to go fast, so pay attention because I want to leave some time for questions as well. What we want to talk about is data and data security, what type of data we're talking about and why it's important right now. Talk a little bit about DataSecOps or the mindset of DataSecOps, and then why should we automate data security and why should we do that right now as organizations and as people who are running those functions in organizations, and discuss what are the core things to automate around data security and how do you automate, like what are the ways to automate that. And I'm going to give some examples from some of our customers in Satori. I will not discuss Satori in length, but of course, any of you interested can find the information on our website, satoricyber.com, and then leave some time for answers. So let's talk about data and data security. Data, and this goes well with the end of like the last question and the answers. Data is growing in use in organizations. We all know the graphs. We all know that more and more data is stored, more and more data is processed, used, moving to the cloud, more databases, as well as data warehouses with platforms like Redshift, Snowflake, and BigQuery, which is also Herzberg to run for our next talk. So more and more data, and basically organizations are in a journey from, in many cases in the beginning, they have the default to know approach to data, where a lot of employees, sometimes all employees, has access to data in a somewhat uncontrolled way or even totally uncontrolled way. This includes customer data, sensitive data. This puts the organization at risk, both compliance risk and security risk. And so as they grow, they move to a need to know approach where you're getting in many cases, data access as part of RBAC, role-based access control. So if I'm part of the research team, I'm getting access according to research data. And the transformation right now that's happening in many organizations is that, okay, there's the need to know basis, which is risk averse, but the need is to grow to a need to share. Data sharing within the organization is driving so much business and is driving such great results because many people from the organization can make use of analytic tools and machine learning algorithms and so on to make use of the data. So it's not just an analytic team that does all of this. The customer success team wants access to a lot of data from a lot of data sets in the organization to reduce customer churn, for example. And sales ops wants to get access to a lot of data to predict who's the right AE to handle which account and so on. So basically everyone wants a piece of the data, and there is a move in the current years and the following years to a need to share. Like by being a data owner, the default is that you should share the data, but you should do it in a secure way. Everybody wants a piece of the data. Everyone wants data-driven value. In many teams in the organization, processes that are called data democratization, and there are many names for it. But in typical organizations, we did a survey recently, like 6 months ago or so, where 75% of the security and data leaders said they have a project in motion to allow more and more people to access data in the organization. Oh, and there's the actual widget for that. Trying to move to the, okay. So basically, all of this data-driven value is relying on data teams that are their core value to the organization is their ability to allow more people to make more use of the data. So they handle the ETL, ELTs of the organization. So the organization can ingest more data, can enrich the data, can analyze the data better, process the data better, and so on and so forth. But also the security of the data in many cases is on them. So security teams in most organizations are setting the requirements for data access and for data use, the policies required. And unlike endpoints where they have complete control over the policies on the endpoints, at least in most organizations, and unlike network in which they have good visibility, data, especially data warehouses, also data lakes, and databases are lacking in visibility for the security team. So it's all on the data teams. And data is getting hard to control as more people access it, as more people move it around, enrich, add data to that data, move it around, process it, introduce new data. Touch things in semi-structured data that is incorporated within data warehouses and replaces schemas without anyone knowing, and so on and so forth. A lot of things that are happening with data with all of these users, and it's getting very hard to control, especially since it's in most organizations dispersed. You have your snowflakes, but then you also have your MongoDBs, and you have your RDSs, and in many cases, different teams are handling different data, and data is getting hard to control. So part of that survey that we had, 44% of the organizations also don't really know continuously. Actually, it's more than 44%. That's from the organization who do monitor sensitive data, but they only do it periodically. So they only know about sensitive data once a quarter or once a year, and think that the data is moving so fast nowadays It's like software deployments. You don't do that once every quarter or once every month or even once every week. So that is some innovative yet scary stuff that's happening around data. And there are more risks around data, more security risks around data because more people can access it. So you have security risks like sensitive data exposure from your customer data. You have more compliance risks as compliance audits around data are getting more and more challenging and I would say sophisticated, which is a good thing, by the way. It pushes the level of compliant organizations upwards. You need to show that you know who is accessing data, when are they accessing data, what are the workflows they are doing. If I'm an engineer, 2 a.m., I need access to the production data. What is the process around it? Who gives the approval? And so on. Is it audited? Where do you keep the audits? And so on. So compliance is getting harder around data. Privacy requirements, it's like mushrooms after the rain, all of these privacy regulations that we have in the last years. And this is especially important for global organizations where they sometimes have multiple privacy requirements in multiple regions, and operational risks as well. Someone who is sending a query in BigQuery running it in a loop in Python, and then the organization gets a high bill for a lot of data scan, or someone who just knocks off a database because more and more people are using data. There's also a lack of, because data is, in a growing way, data-driven organizations, there is no clear answer as to who is responsible for securing access to sensitive data. Is it security teams? Is it the data engineers, data architects, DevOps teams, by the way, in many cases for production data? Is it the privacy teams? Is it the GRC teams? Is it the analysts themselves? Is it the data owners? In many cases, you will get different answers from different people within the same organizations, and of course, from outside organizations. DataSecOps is a term that we use to basically the transformation that happened with data, with the cloud adoption, with the CI/CD, with a lot of what's happening around data is very similar to what happened with DevOps and DevSecOps. I will not go into that in depth because I'm sure that a lot of you know this by heart. But there were a lot of issues with DevOps at the beginning years, and in some organizations until now. I call this DevOps. So DevOps, first of all, in many organizations, it was a team. The team was responsible of taking packages from one place, putting it in another place, taking it from the repo, putting it in production, monitoring it. But it wasn't the mindset of the organization itself. There were many issues around misconfiguration and change management. Alex touched that a bit. Things that are still happening today. Okay, I'm not saying everything is perfect around DevOps.
There is a huge sector behind it. The CSPMs of the world are making money out of that mistake.
So I'm not saying everything is perfect, but what I'm saying is that the DataOps world is newer in its adoption of the cloud, in its expansion, in moving data warehouses to the cloud, newer than moving applications to the cloud. So the risks in there are still growing faster. And the cost of security as a patch can be critical. So security needs to be part of the DevOps process. The main, I would say, like TLDR of the move from DevOps to DevSecOps, the shift to the left, focusing on making sure that the code is secure in the repo itself and developed correctly, and making sure it's incremental changes that are continuously tested by security testing as well as other testing, reliability and so on. A strong focus on automation, and that security is embedded into the process from design to monitoring. So DataSecOps, basically, it's putting this framework of DevSecOps to data operations between the data consumers, the data producers, or the security teams, the data teams, and making sure that there is a focus around security and around automation that makes sure that data operations are also secure. And the main principles are that security is a continuous part of the data operation, not an afterthought from the design, and not like applications. Data needs to be like that as well. Anything, there should be a strike through here. Anything that is ad hoc should be continuous in meaning, of course, it's a rule of thumb, but if you're scanning your data for sensitive data once every quarter or once every year, then you're probably not doing something right if your organization is data-driven and the data keeps changing, right? Because the next day, your sensitive data inventory is not going to be correct. So everything needs to be continuous. You need to know continuously what sensitive data is added to your data. And same goes with everything, with managing permissions. You can't just set and forget. You can't give Alex Peleg access to your data because he has a project and then forget it and leave it on. It needs to be just-in-time access. He needs to get it for the time of the project. He needs to get it, and once he's no longer using it, it needs to be removed. Separation of environments for testing and automation, which is for applications, it's a bread and butter, but unfortunately, in many cases, mainly in analytic databases, you still see, and also in large companies, you see people who want to make use of the customers table, and they just do create table customers 2 as select star from customers 1, and they start playing with this table. So in many organizations, this is not yet in the same maturity level as applications. And you need to prioritize on the sensitive data because that's the most risk in terms of security, in terms of compliance. So I would say that what keeps the organization data-driven, like what gives the data-driven value is not only the data operation and the data teams, it's to make sure that it's done in a secure way. Because we've seen it in many cases, also this year with a couple of breaches of sensitive data within organization. I don't want to name names, but you see that if you have a data operation that is that your company is considered as, one of the best data-driven companies, but if you don't make sure that security is on par, then you can suffer consequences. So that is my point around that. And the question that I ask is, would you do manual DevSecOps? Would you let your DevOps engineers go into SSH into terminals and apply security policies on applications? No, you would not. Probably, hopefully, you would not. And that is uncommon, at least from what I've seen in the traditional DevOps world. But in data, that still happens in many cases. The Snowflake admin logs into the Snowflake environment to run SQL queries that will enable or disable people from seeing sensitive data, that will do many of the things. Many things are run manually. In many cases, DevOps go into production environments of databases, like they go into the organization MySQL and MariaDB just to open an account for someone, to grant them access because there is a problem in 3 a.m. and someone needs to figure it out. And that is, I would say, immaturity in the data space that is changing these years, and organizations understand that and they move to automation. So that is the main reason why you should automate. So that was a reverse slide. you should automate because keeping it manually does not scale. It scales if you have 5 data users, you don't have a lot of data, you don't have sensitive data. Okay, then you can manage everything manually. But if you have a substantial amount of data users, substantial amount of data, that is hard to scale, and it is also not productive. So even if you're keeping security, it will take its toll, as I will give a couple of examples later on. So a couple of examples from some of the people I spoke with. So on the one hand, it's like the data is a black box. So like we have all the security controls in place, but one of our users can simply do select star from customers. And as we know in Israel, that also happened a few years ago in a famous incident. Or the other end is productivity. I have an army of people creating users, roles, views to abstract some of the sensitive data. By the time they are done, the project is over. You lost your data project, and that's a cost you can't take as an organization, especially not in 2023. So we all know that businesses are losing revenue due to data breaches. We all know about the security risks. I'm sure that if I will ask any of you in the audience, we all know we are all in security. Doesn't matter if we've been here for 20 years or for one day. We all know how important it is not to have a data breach. But this is as important. Between 60 and 85% of data projects in organizations fail, and the second number, DevOps and data engineering teams, mainly DevOps for production data, data engineering teams for analytic data. They typically spend, unless it's a small, uncomplicated organization, 20 to 30% of their time on granting privileges, on revoking privileges, on applying security policies, applying dynamic masking, data localization, and so on and so forth, all of these security and compliance stuff. That, small hint, they also don't like to do. It's not part of their core activity. This is not what they signed up for. So looking at it from another perspective, most organizations, like 70 to 80% of the data leaders deal with PII, with personal identifiable information. The other 20%, as Alex will say, are lying. And so they don't consider PII. It's PII because it's their employees. It's not real people.
Or they don't know, which is a
or they don't know.
different type of issue.
Yeah. But 62% also says that of data and security leaders say that security and compliance also slows down their data projects, and this is a big reason why why so many data projects are failing. So basically, by automating data access, what I mentioned earlier, applying just in time, Alex would get the access, or Ron, this time it's Ron, because he's on mute and his video is off. So Ron he needs access 3 a.m. Sorry, he needs access 3 a.m. He needs to get it. Now the organization needs to think not at 3 a.m. but right now. They need to think, okay, if Ron needs access at 3 a.m., do I give it access? Does he need an approval? Maybe he doesn't need approval. So you give him just in time, all of it works through Jira or through Slack or through other, whatever, in-organization application, and he gets the access automatically. It's like a small fence he needs to climb, but otherwise he needs to get access, maybe an approval, but it needs to be automated. It can't be something that one day he filed a ticket and it happens in 5 hours, and the next day it happens in 5 days. All of this needs to be in a process. So why especially now? in 2023. I don't know how many of you people are managing budgets or speaking with people who are managing buckets. You're saying, I need $10 million. Best I can do is $5, as we all love this show, the Pawn Stars. But seriously speaking, it's 2023 with the economic situation. There is a very, very, very strong focus on efficiency. And if your DevOps team is spending 20-30% on manual stuff, then you need those people because you're not getting any new headcounts for DevOps, as an example. So what to automate? So you want to automate whatever has the most effect on security and compliance, right? Because that's where your money is. And whatever is taking its toll. If it's something you need to do once every year, you don't need to take care of that. Meaning that the main thing I would do, I would automate log processing. Like you have 200 databases, and if you need to get visibility and check and analyze the access logs for these 200 servers, that is one thing. And data access, of course, which is taking a huge toll from the operational teams. So authentication, but mainly authorization, like who can access which data, and applying security policies across the board, like masking policies, row-level security, and all of these beasts in the data world. So the challenge team is that security teams are in charge of security. Data is usually a black box, and the security team has little visibility into what's going on in there, and that is why it's hard to implement this security. It's not in the domain of security engineers. Usually, they don't do SQL commands to grant access, revoke access, or create views to abstract the data. So they need to have other people do it who don't want to do it. Basically, I would say I wouldn't go into that entire table, but I would say that in many cases, the journey takes organizations from an ad hoc manual access that is persistent in many cases, then gets access for the entire time he works at the company, to building a wrapper around it, building an RBAC, using an RBAC framework, giving access by roles, and so on. The easy tools on your toolbox that you should use to reduce some of that stress and some of that manual work, but the real solution is just-in-time data access. 20% of the access is persistent because it's constantly in use, but 80% you get it only when you need it, but it needs to be in a simple way. You can do it by building a portal, like doing it yourself, which is usually a high bandwidth project, which is why it's mostly outside of the core of the company. But in bigger companies like Amazon or companies like that, they have enough resources for building good internal tools. You can use orchestration platforms, and those are tools that are using native capabilities to apply security policies and give and take access. The main drawbacks from that, and this is why we did not choose this approach, is that you have no visibility into sensitive data. You do not know where your sensitive data is, and you're limited to the native capabilities of the databases. Or you can use a data security platform. Smiley means like Satori, or even better, Satori. So just a couple of the automation results we have seen. Both are large global companies. One of them bought Satori for the security value, not for its productivity gain, but they wanted to find ways to reduce, to increase efficiency in their DevOps teams. They checked what they do in their time. They found out that most of their time, or not most of the time, but 25% of their DevOps time was spent on security tasks. They freed that time by moving to just in time. There's a data portal. You go in, you get access to the data. You don't need You don't need to interact with anyone. And that is one example. And the other is in analytic databases where basically data engineering tried to start a project of just-in-time on their own, building using APIs of the data warehouse, but they found out that it's tail chasing. It's taking a lot of time on their end by applying masking, row-level security, RBAC, ABAC, and it's a moving target. It became much more than 25% of their time. It seemed like a good idea at first, like many things, but then it's a project with a tail that you need to maintain. So that's why they did it, and basically it freed for that specific organization more than 50% of their data engineering time, which was into that project, and it was very important for them as well from a compliance standpoint. They were pre-IPO, so that was their story. So automation is important, whether you do it yourself, with Satori, or with another company. Automating data security is a must, and that's my takeaway. So if you got data and users, congrats, you need to automate your data security game. You only need to choose how, as I mentioned. I did say it's a lot of stuff to cover. So if there are any questions, and if we don't have time, you can ping me privately, send me messages. I don't know if we have time, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think we're right on time.
We have way too much time. Lots of questions, man. So a couple of questions that we got from the audience. Let's start with this one. So who would you say would benefit the most from integrating a data security platform? Is it the security team, is it the data team, some other teams? So I would say that it splits, because I speak to many people in data teams and in security teams, and also like the people we interact with are sometimes from the data teams and sometimes from the security teams. Most of the time that will be saved will be on the data teams, but the visibility that you're getting from the data security platform and the ability to enforce policies from one location and actually control data security is mostly the benefit of the security teams. So in terms of productivity, it's the data teams. In terms of security, it's the security teams. And some of the other teams that are involved, DevOps, of course, when it comes to production data, and data privacy or privacy teams as well, and data governance teams. Okay, so thanks for that one. And what are the typical security requirements you see customers facing around data warehouse, like Redshift, Snowflake, and others?
So most of the security requirements are around knowing where you have sensitive data, and when you have new sensitive data inside your data warehouses, it has lots of people touching it. It's about masking sensitive data on the fly, making sure that sensitive data is masked. Data localization is also a smaller use case, but we see that like you can access the customers, but only in your region. And another thing that is quite common is being able to control when a BI tool is connected with Redshift, for example. In many cases, they use one database user for that. So it's like putting the identity of the user, of the real users that is doing everything. So having the right logs that doesn't say AWS user on all the queries, but having the visibility and the ability to enforce policies on the actual users of the data.
Mm-hmm. Another question we have here, thanks for that one, is this kind of solution can identify PII information in logs and database tables? What about the protection status, encrypted versus clear text, or any other type of policy that you can align with or check compliance with?
Okay, so first of all, for specific requirements, I suggest you either you contact me or you go to our website and you can check in there or set a meeting. But basically, and I don't know if it's generically or about our product. Okay, so generically, the answer is it depends. Specifically, we identify sensitive data in real time as it passes. We decrypt the data, so all the data that is transferred, almost all the data that is transferred today is fortunately encrypted. We decrypt it on the way to inspect it and to analyze the data and enforce the policies on it. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, so I hope so too. And also, last one is there a way, someone asks, is there a way for me to try your platform out?
Yes. So first of all, you can contact me, but you can just go to our website. It's down there, satoricyber.com. You can do /test drive, or you can navigate in the menu to test drive. And you can try it out, or you can just set a meeting and someone will walk it through with you. But you can set on a test drive. You will get an environment with sandbox, like sandbox databases, our sandbox databases, that you can see what the product looks like. But and you can even connect your own databases through Satori. It's very simple, and all the documentation is online as well.
Excellent. So thank you very, very much, Ben. That was really, really informative. And kudos for the LinkedIn and Twitter names. I really liked it.
Thank you.
Let's just show that you are old enough to catch those specific names.
Old enough. Old enough is the yeah.
Age before beauty.
Then
there was one question that I think that I hacked my and you didn't get it. The question was regarding who is responsible on data stored on cloud. Is it the user, or does the cloud provider has some kind of a responsibility?
So the shared responsibility model sets the responsibility between the data platform or cloud platform, like Snowflake, like the data platforms in AWS, like Azure, Synapse, SQL Server, and so on. And then it depends on the specific threat or the specific part of it. So, for example, physical security is, of course, the responsibility of the cloud provider. But if you, for example, if your data engineers gave access to an employee on Snowflake, opened an account for an employee on Snowflake, and then that account got breached, or if the employee left your company and you left the account with him as a souvenir, or if he he committed it to Git, and someone took the credentials from there and viewed all your sensitive information, I'm afraid that's your responsibility as an organization.
Absolutely.
Of course,